So let's get started with topic one, which is going to be an introduction to office procedures. And so in this video, we're just going to talk about basic things that you need to know about the office and about this course in general. This course is going to go into a lot of information on what happens in an office space that persons who aren't privy to those spaces may not have known about. So you're going to learn that office spaces do certain things in an office, do things a certain way, and different people have different roles in the office that need to be followed. If I look at a receptionist in one office, I should be able to compare a receptionist in another office and see that they're doing a similar job. And so throughout this course, throughout your BGCSE classes, or grade 10 to 12, those are the things that you're going to learn about what actually happens in the background of an office and pretty much understand the roles and the task of people that have tasks in office spaces. This introduction is meant to just give you an idea of what an office is and what an office is supposed to do, so that when we talk about the other topics, you'll be able to understand a whole lot better and a little bit more based on this introduction. So let's get started. I start by saying, welcome to the virtual space. Let's work together to learn, share ideas, participate, and learn something new. The wise always seeks knowledge. That's something I want to put to you. As you get through the journey, it's going to be hard. It's not always easy, but you can do it. I know you can. Let's talk about the office itself. So, about the office. What do you think learning about office procedures, why do you think it's even important? Well, when we think about it, just about every business has an actual office space. You can't find a business that doesn't do some type of office work because it's essential to business. It's actually also one of the easiest jobs to get into out of high school. And so it's a good class, I would say, because it gives you that some information. You may not know everything or you may not retain everything, but if you happen to come out of high school and go into an office job, which one that may not always require you to have years of experience and degrees, at least some of the things may be familiar to you. And so that's some of the things you're going to learn throughout the process of this particular class. Just about every business has an office space, yes. Every business performs some type of office duties. And so an example of some office duties are going to be answering the telephone, sending emails, sending invoices to customers. Whether you have a big business or a small business, you're going to have to do those things if you want to continue on as a business. You can't get around it. If you're an entrepreneur, someday you'll need to know how to do this stuff, because if you plan on running your own business, whether you're doing it on your own or you're going to have a person to assist you, there are some things that you're going to need to do that is considered to be office work. And so it's important not just for persons working for others, but also persons that are working for themselves. And it's also a great choice that a great chance that many persons will fall into the role of an office job sometime in the future. So it's a good class to be a part of. When we look at an office, if you want to describe what it is, an office is a place where the affairs of a business, professional person, or an organization are being carried out. So all of the goals and the vision and the mission of a business or an organization can't be carried out without somebody in the middle helping to orchestrate everything. If the goal of the company is to reach as many customers as possible and provide this service to so many customers, somebody has to take the role of sitting down and putting together a list of customers that they could possibly call, finding the telephone numbers of those customers, and somebody has to actually call them. Sometimes you're going to send out an email. Sometimes you need to take some notes or you need to organize a meeting with people. And all of those things are things that happen in an office space. And so the office is just a central place that supports all other parts of the business. If you think about a common business like a Wendy's or a Burger King or any fast food restaurant, yes, there's a fast food restaurant where you see persons putting things together, but there needs to also be an office space because there's somebody in the background that has to pay the salaries of those employees. They can't be in the kitchen or cleaning the floors. They actually have to be in the process of putting a report together, sending information to the bank, writing a check. All of these things happen in an office space. So whether you see the office space at the physical building, that doesn't mean that there isn't an office space for a particular business. And so offices are everywhere, and offices are needed everywhere. An office can be for businesses of any size. Large businesses always have some type of office space, and sometimes they can have multiple office spaces. When we talk about businesses in any field, this is going to be a business, whether they're in the field of construction or whether they're in a school field, is going to be needed. If you look at businesses that are located anywhere in the world, they're going to have multiple offices. Sometimes there's going to be an office in the foreign country. There's going to be an office in the home country, which is the main country of the owners of the business. And they sometimes are going to work together, but they're always going to be some type of office space that allows them to work. And then offices can also be filled with as many staff as the business likes or as the business needs. A smaller business may not need 10 staff, whereas a large business may not work properly with 10 staff and need more. So the size of the business often affects how big the office is and how many persons are needed to properly operate the office so that the business can be properly supported. Roles and functions of the office. The role of the office is to reflect the mission, vision, and goals of the organization. Like I said earlier, the office is a big support system for the business and its leaders, its employees, and it's crucial to proper business management. The office is to collect, process, and store or preserve data. When we think of office spaces, a lot of information, a lot of data comes into an office, whether it be on paper, whether it be through conversations, verbally with persons, whether it be electronically through the internet or through a computer screen. Information is coming into the office. And so a big part of the office's function is to help make sure that information goes where it's supposed to go, making sure that somebody's keeping a record of the information, sending it where it needs to go, and saving it if need be, so that persons can get to it at a later date. All of those are the functions of the office. We can talk about things like alternative offices. Like I said, all businesses have some form of an office. It may not be a full, huge office space, but maybe it can be one of these alternative offices, your virtual office, maybe a mobile office or a home office. A virtual office is when you have persons that are working that telecommute, or they move from location to location. And what they do is because they move, they actually communicate and do a lot of their work through the internet. And so commute, we're communicating, normally through the telephone or through a telephone connection. And so in a virtual office, telecommuting happens through an internet connection. What happens then in some instances is companies, what they do is they invest in They invest in a network, sorry. They invest in a network that allows their staff to communicate internally. And normally we call that an intranet, where you have computers in a workspace that can communicate with each other in that particular space. And so persons outside of the company or non-employees oftentimes can't get in to the company space, and therefore that's really beneficial for a lot of big offices because they want to keep information private in between custom employees only, and they also want to make sure that they can see what's going on if an employee is away or whatnot. It's very helpful in that regard. Mobile office, when we look at a mobile office, they are operating temporarily off site from main operations. So a good example of that is these vans from different businesses. For example, the Alive telephone company van. It's performing services. It's selling goods to customers. They can maybe pay their bills there. They can maybe check on their products there, but it's not attached to a physical building or the main office. That's an example of a mobile office. It's a space that is not particularly set. It's just based on wherever the office has been set up at a particular time. If you think about the individuals that came over after Dorian or that are helping persons in different countries, they have mobile offices attached to their little small segments as well. And so they are able to communicate with the home office or the main office and still work at a location that's considered to be remote, which is not attached to the main office. A home office would be an office for persons that work for themselves, most instances, or have a very small amount of staff that can fit in a home office. And so it's just office space that you primarily use at home. You have telephone and you have internet, and that's key because that's the only way that you can properly communicate to persons you need to communicate, like your vendors who are persons you're buying things from, your customers, people buying things from you. That's the only way that you can communicate with them. You need telephone, you need internet. And so that's key to a home office. A lot of persons with home offices are also called freelancers. And freelancers are individuals that don't work for a particular company, but they work for whomever. A good example of freelancers can be persons in graphic design. A lot of graphic designers are freelancers. Whoever wants them to be their graphic designer, they're going to be their graphic designer. Or maybe they have multiple clients that they work with, but because they don't work with one particular company and they kind of work for themselves, they can work at home and do work for different persons at different companies. And so that's an example of a person that's considered to be a freelancer. When we talk about types of offices, we have to keep in mind that it's going to vary based on organization. Every organization doesn't have the same type of office. So it's easy for a telephone company that services a lot of customers to have a mobile office, whereas some offices have to be in a certain place at a certain time and they can't move. Some businesses can be at home, some businesses can't. And so that means that there's always going to be different types of organizations you have to consider when you're talking about offices. And so types of organizations are what we're going to talk about next. Organizations can be divided into three main categories. What makes them differ is their goals. And so the three categories are businesses, not-for-profit entities, and governmental units. However, businesses have one goal: to make a profit. And so that just means that no matter how much money they spend, they want to collect more, or they want to have the possibility to collect more than they spend. So they want to charge, give out more invoices than they giving out checks and payments, that kind of thing. When a company does that, when they have more revenue or more sales than they have expenses, then they're considered to have a profit. And a company that is a business is only created to make a profit. Whereas companies like not or organizations like not-for-profit organizations and governmental units, they're not interested in making a profit. Their goal is to provide a service or a product to their customers. So when we think of not-for-profit entities, we can think of churches, we can think of charities. In churches, they're providing a service and they're not trying to make money. They're just trying to be able to pay the bills that they have. They're not concerned with making a profit. Same thing with charities. Charities oftentimes are not trying to build a huge amount of money in the bank. They're trying to make sure if their charity is paying off medical bills on behalf of someone, they're trying to make sure that they can pay off those medical bills on behalf of someone. They're not concerned about, okay, the cost went up, so we need to start charging more. In fact, a lot of times they don't charge anything. If we think of things like Goodwill and Salvation Army takes used clothes and they sell them back to the community, but they're not trying to charge full price. They're just trying to charge enough that gives them sufficient funds to be able to help feed the community or pay the very little staff they have. That is their goal, to provide the service or product. They're not trying to make a whole lot of money. When we think of governmental agencies, we think of places like the passport office and road traffic. They're not trying to make a huge amount of money, probably charging $20 for a service, $10 for a service, and they probably have been charging those fees for years. The goal is not to make a profit and get a huge amount of money for the services they provide. They are attached to a government system. And the government system, for example, in case of the passport office, is to make sure that every citizen has a passport. That's the goal, not to make money off of passports. Same thing with the road traffic. Road traffic's goal is to make sure that all cars are registered and make sure that all cars on the road are up to a certain standard and that persons on the street have the right to be on the street. They pass a test and they're of certain age. All of that is the goal of road traffic department, not to charge you money for your driver's license or to renew. If that was the case, they probably would have gone up on those prices a long time ago. Because they're not a business, they're governmental, they're not going to go after making the most money. They're just going to go after making sure everybody can afford to pay the fee and get the things that they're supposed to have as citizens of a particular country. All right. When we talk about businesses, like I said, they're trying to make a profit. And the thing with businesses is that there are actually multiple types of businesses. One, for example, like these photos here, this is an example of what I'm going to say is a sole proprietorship. In a sole proprietorship, there's one person, and that one person is in charge. There is no other person that's in charge. That person is the owner. They're the only owner, and that makes them a sole proprietorship in business. So a lot of mom and pop stores have the mom or the pop is in charge of the store. It's their store. The store is in their name. They're considered to be a sole proprietorship. We have a partnership, which can only come about through agreement. It can be two or more persons coming together and agreeing, hey, let's open up a store. We agree to open up this store. We agree to, you're going to bring in your money. I'm going to bring in my money. We're going to put it together. And we're going to operate the store together. We're going to share any losses that we have. We're going to share any profits that we have. That tends to be what a partnership sounds like. The only disadvantage of a sole proprietorship and a partnership itself is that if there are any losses, then the individual that's the owners can be held liable for those losses or forced to pay it out of their personal funds. That's your sole proprietorship and partnership. That's the only main disadvantage to them, but they're very easy to set up. Next is a big one, a corporation, which a lot of big companies are going to be corporations because it protects the owners. So in a corporation, the owners are normally shareholders. And this is where you sell shares. And anybody who, if you want to be the sole person with shares to your company, you can do that. But normally corporations are very big companies with multiple owners from all over the world or all over the island or different islands. And what happens is they come into an agreement to create a company. They don't come into agreement to work together because once you sell shares, that person who sold the shares is no longer the owner, and the person who bought the shares is now a partial owner. They don't have much say depending on how much shares they have in the company, but they're a partial owner that can benefit whenever a company pays out dividends, which are a form of profits. And so corporations are legal entities, so they are separate from their owners in that a company could sue another company, but they can't sue the owner or the shareholders of a corporation. Most times they can only sue the corporation, which is why a lot of persons go after corporations instead of the sole proprietorship and partnership, because their personal funds are normally secure when you have a corporation. A limited liability company is actually a blend between the three of these here. They have some benefits of a corporation and some benefits of a sole proprietorship and a partnership, but they are not very common in the Bahamas. Now, we talked about organizations and we talked basically about the office, but let's talk about things that happen in an office. So we know what an office is supposed to do, but let's break it down even further. In an office and different offices within a business, you're going to be doing things like initiating, coordinating, filing and data storage and accounting tasks as well. Different office tasks involve putting together memos, creating letters and reports, organizing and summarizing and interpreting data, creating presentations. Somebody in a business office or in an office in general, if you have to send out letters, send out reports, somebody has to sit down and put them together. Somebody has to create them. Somebody has to take the information, organize it in order for it to go into a report. And so that's a key office task. We have things like coordinating. There's somebody who is making sure information is being shared between departments, someone who is giving instructions, someone who is preparing and giving presentations and requesting information. Then there's somebody that's going to be filing and making sure data is being stored. So maintaining company files, physical filing of actual records. There's somebody entering data into accounting software, preparing things like checks and taking in invoices, sending out invoices. All of these things are key to a properly running office. Without the accounting aspect, how will your customer know how much you charge them? They need an invoice. How do you know if the customer pays if nobody is paying attention to when a customer sends money in or when a payment is made and keeping track of a balance? How do you share information with everybody in your company if you're not trying to coordinate and come together and put things together like memos and letters to inform people of certain things? Everything works together. Some other tasks as well are going to be, sorry about that. Some other tasks are administrative tasks, and these are things like supervising or hiring employees. Administrative mean that we're just adding even more support to the other departments. So administrative tasks, typing and preparing documents, ordering goods and supplies, copying, all of these things help all of the departments. Then legal administration, somebody has to know some legal information. And so oftentimes very big companies have some type of legal department that does the legal administration work. Smaller companies tend to ask their lawyers to assist with things like that. And so that's a way to share office tasks as well. So if you think about it, that means that these are some tasks that happen within a law firm office. If it's not your company's office, the law firm has to do these things to assist your company. When we look at companies itself, there's a lot of technology that's involved in business. And so technology is common in most of today's offices, things like software application, the internet, so the World Wide Web, www, get it? Yes. The World Wide Web, the internet, the intranet, like we talked about earlier, the internet that's specifically for the employees of the company. Nobody outside can access it. And so these are key things that are happening in our offices today. It's difficult to get into an office and do office work if you don't know anything about Microsoft products like Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint. You also have to have some type of knowledge of things like Facebook and Instagram, some type of computer knowledge, internet knowledge, WhatsApp knowledge, because all of these things are now being used in business. And so these technologies just keeps evolving, and these changing technologies affect the way work is being done in offices. Now, it doesn't mean that persons are being more productive because we have this technology. We should be, but technology is also a distraction as well. And you can't be productive if you can't get your work done in a timely manner, or if your work has a lot of errors and is incorrect. And so technology does not help with that because it can be a bit of a distraction to employees. When we talk about organization, I want you to know that organization size matters. The size of an organization determines how many staff are needed and how many departments are needed. In most organizations, especially big ones, the different tasks and things that you saw are normally broken out into different departments. So there's some departments that are responsible for certain things. For example, human resources is a department that's responsible for hiring staff, firing staff, training staff. And so in a big business, they're going to have a whole human resources department, maybe a whole manager, maybe a supervisor and staff. Whereas in a small company, maybe they can't afford all of that. And so maybe there's one person doing it, or maybe the owner takes that on. And so the size of the organization matters how the tasks are being done. With a smaller organization, there's going to be less specialized workers or persons that have specific knowledge about something. So an HR person that has a degree most likely is not going to be in a small organization. They're most likely going to be in a larger organization who can afford to pay for their degree. There's even going to be equipment in a large organization that you'll never find in a small organization, because larger organizations tend to make more money, and therefore they could be able to afford a lot of the equipment. Organizational structure will also be affected by size. The larger the organization is, the more structure is needed to make sure everybody is doing their work, everybody isn't wasting time, the company isn't losing money. Okay? Technology needs also increase as organizations grow. So as a company gets bigger, they need more technology. It's harder to manage, let's say 1,000 followers versus managing 2 followers. And so whereas it's easy to manage or send emails out to 2 people, it's going to be harder to send emails out to 1,000 people. And so therefore you're going to need something that's going to help you to send out 1,000 emails at once to make sure we don't have somebody just sitting down trying to send 1,000 emails out one by one. And so in business, organization size matters. Let's look at organizational structure. Now, previously we said organizational structure will affect the size of a company. Organizational structure just talks about how certain tasks are delegated to help a company do what it's supposed to be doing. So that's just like what I said earlier with a human resources department. The organizational structure of a human resource department can be one person working in it, or can be there's an HR manager, there's an HR supervisor, there's an HR staff or HR clerk. That would be the organizational structure. It's a ladder of sorts that needs to be followed. There's some people always at the top, and there are some people at the bottom. At the top are always going to be your high paid individuals, your more educated individuals, or persons that have the most experience are going to be at the top, making sure that the persons at the bottom are completing the tasks that they should be completing. The more authorities employees have, the higher up they'll be in the organizational structure. And so they'll be considered to be management. And management has a big responsibility. They're tasked with responsibility, making sure that the staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing, delegation, giving out tasks to different persons, or giving out policies to follow. And then they have the authority. They have the right to say certain things or the right to fire somebody, versus staff may not have that right. Structure shows a chain of command that is followed by a business. And so this can be shown on an organizational chart. So here I have an example of an organizational chart where it shows that at the very top of this is going to be a corporation. At the very top of a corporation, there are people like your shareholders who, like we say, are our owners. Nobody is above our owners. Everybody has to be below. And so our shareholders, our owners, are at the very top of the chart. They're at the top of the organization structure, right? Below them is going to be board of directors who they hire to oversee or make sure that the company is running the way it should. Below that person is going to be CEO. Then you can have different departments or different persons responsible for different things. And even though you don't see it here, because these can get pretty big, there are going to be different staff underneath each of these areas to help get it done. We have GM, General Manager of Sales. General Manager has to manage staff. And so therefore, there's going to be somebody underneath that they are managing. They can't do all of the sales on their own. When you have a smaller businesses, organizational charts are not even this big. This is going to be a huge company because they have so many general managers, and those managers are going to have staff underneath them. Sometimes, depending on how many staff they have, they might even have a supervisor underneath them. And so, as you can see, these organizational charts can get really big, get really complicated. But when you look at them, just know that the person at the top of the organizational chart is in charge. They have the most power. They have the most power, the most authority. They can, what they say trumps what the board of directors say, what the CEOs say, what all everybody else below them, it trumps what they say. The persons at the bottom of the chart are normally the persons that are not as experienced. They don't have very much power, but they do a lot more of the work. Normally at the top, those are the thinkers. They make the decisions. They pass things down. They make really big decisions. But the persons at the bottom are usually the ones that are working and following whatever it is that they want the person at the top want them to do. And so this is a good time to point out that when we talk about organizational structure, pay attention to the fact that, like I said, these persons at the top have the authority. And so when they pass information down, normally everybody has to follow it. And so information actually can be passed down and it can be passed back up as well. Think about regular staff members learning that customers don't like a product. They can pass that information up to whomever will listen and makes decisions on purchasing items. Because if you're selling to a customer, oftentimes you're not purchasing the items or not in charge of what's being purchased. And so information also passes from below to the top when we think about it as well. And information is also going to be passing sideways as well, just to allow individuals to share information across as well. When we look at the structure of organizations, those are the levels that we saw on the organizational chart. And so just to give you an idea, at the very top tends to be right underneath the owner, tends to be board of directors, and these are elected members. So shareholders normally come together and they vote on who is going to be a director. So that's what the word elected means. They're elected members at the top of the organization, and they provide guidance and they make decisions about the company. An example of that is going to be our chairman is the main person who is in charge of the board of directors. But anybody that's on the board is considered to be a member. They, like I said, they're elected by shareholders and they help make decisions on behalf of the company that should benefit the shareholders. Below them is going to be senior management, and they're normally selected by the board. So the board is responsible for hiring who can be senior management of a company. And these senior management, what they do is they create policies or rules that or things that they want the business to do based on decisions made by the board. And so key persons in senior management tend to be a CEO, which is Chief Executive Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, COO, Chief Operations Officer, and so on and so forth, because there are a number of other ones that can be there. But normally when you see C and a letter in between an O, the first word is normally chief. The second word is normally, the last word is normally officer. You can put CTO, Chief Technology Officer, CIO, Chief Information Officer, and so on and so forth. But these are your senior managers. They create policies for the business to follow. Middle managers are right underneath senior managers, and they normally direct the daily activities to ensure that the policies that were created above are actually being followed. And so a good example of middle manager can be people like your supervisors and your managers. Think about it. The supervisors and the managers normally don't make the rules. They just make sure you follow them. And so that's their role. They are making sure that the managers that the staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing so that the goals of the board of directors and the policies of senior management are being carried out. And then, of course, we have our departmental employees, or what we call line staff or regular staff. And these are just workers that are working on a daily basis. So they are the salespeople, the receptionist, the person answering the phone, the person sending out the invoices every day, all day. Those are normally your staff. And so worth mentioning, because I've seen this question before, these individuals down here do most of the work. And they are involved with the daily running of the company, like every day. Senior managers, a lot of them can be there daily, but they don't have to be. But board of directors are hardly ever present at the actual business. They are just in the background. Senior managers pop in and pop out. Middle management is always there. Department, always there. Department employees. When we look at leadership format in an office, it's important, no matter what the structure is or how big or how small it is, that there's proper communication to keep the business working well. And so a good organizational structure and a good team to work together allows for proper employee empowerment, making employees feel like they can ask questions, making them feel as though they can have input on their job and what their job is doing, etc. That's something that's important as well. And so when it comes to that, there are two leadership models, one being centralization and decentralization. When we have centralization as it relates to, let's go back, as it relates to this organizational chart and the setup of the organization, what happens is everything happens in one location. So when you think centralized, whenever you see centralized, think one location. And what happens is there's one set of people that are coming up with rules and thinking about things, and normally that's just it. Leadership happens in one small spot, and normally that is not the most ideal method of leading. Normally what they like to see is decentralization, which is the opposite of centralization, where you have different people being a part of leadership. So maybe you have a different manager in charge of HR, or a different manager in charge of sales, instead of having one manager in charge of everything. Because that one manager may not know everything. They might not know anything about HR. They may not know anything about advertising. And so it's always best in a company when centralization happens on smaller levels. And so it's like considered to be decentralization, pretty much. I talk about departments a lot, and so I just wanted to point out some common departments. We have departments like administration, which is a lot of times that's your secretaries and your receptionists and things like that. We have human resources department. Those are the persons responsible for hiring and firing staff. If you're big enough, legal department, who take on those legal tasks of making sure the company is doing everything in accordance with the law and so on. We have a buying / purchasing / procurement department. Can be called either of the three, but they mean the same thing. And this is a department that's purchasing things on behalf of another department. If the department needs paper, they send in information and say, hey, can you buy us some paper? And they're responsible for making sure that they find the paper for that department and that it's the best price and it's the best quality and it's what they ask for. You have an advertisement department sometimes. They're just responsible for finding persons to put ads together, or maybe they're putting the ads together themselves, trying to determine the best way to advertise for the company. We have sales, which can be our salespersons going out trying to find customers. Production, if it's a company that produces or takes individual items and puts them together for a product to sell, that's a production department. Sometimes there can be a transport department as well. If its company is big enough and needs a whole transport team, person driving, kept dropping things off, etc., that's a department as well. Just as well as something like an accounts department, which is going to be responsible for paying bills and, generating reports and making sure that the company has a profit. All of these are very common departments that are standard in a lot of big companies. But like I said, if the company is small, the tasks in these common departments are just now squeezed into probably one person or two persons, which makes it a whole lot harder. That's the end of our intro. I hope you learned a lot about office procedures so far. Well, more about office than office procedures and what an office is, what it does. We learned how office is set up because there needs to be some type of order, some type of, leadership in office. We learned about that. We learned about the different types of departments that fall in the offices. We learned about the different types of organizations that have offices. And then we learned about the role of the office itself, which has a lot to do with bringing everything together, collecting information, storing information, disseminating or sending out information to whoever needs it, processing information on behalf of other departments. So we learned that the office is important, and just about every business, whether they have a physical office or not, does office tasks. And so check me later. See me in another section where we continue to talk about the office. If you have any questions, any queries, you have my email address that's right there. You can also hit me up on Instagram or the site itself. And I hope to see you in the next section.